3 years ago, Emma Chen walked out of my life with a cruel parting shot telling me I'd never become anything. Fast forward to last month, and she's now my boss at TechFlow Solutions. But what she doesn't know is that I've already lived through the nightmare she's about to unleash. This time I'm not walking in blind. I'm walking in ready. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the air above my tiny cubicle as I stared at the email that had just knocked the wind out of me. Again, the subject line. Congratulations on your promotion. Report to executive floor. My fingers shook as I clicked it open, already dreading what I knew I'd find. Dear Jake Martinez, we're pleased to inform you that you've been selected for the Senior Marketing Coordinator role. Your new supervisor will be Emma Chen, our newly appointed regional manager. Please report to her office Monday at 8 a.m. sharp. Emma Chen. The woman who shattered my heart 3 years ago was now positioned to ruin my career. In my previous life, yes, previous life, this moment marked the beginning of a long, slow collapse. 2 years of toxic office politics, sabotage, psychological warfare ended with me having a full breakdown in the company parking garage. Security found me babbling about conspiracies and betrayal. Everyone wrote me off as a burnout. The thing. When you relive your worst moments, you notice everything you missed the first time. Like how Emma's rapid rise through the ranks didn't quite add up, how my promotion placed me directly under her thumb, or how my closest ally, Tyler from IT, was mysteriously moved to another department right before Emma's arrival. The memory of my death quiet, unremarkable, surrounded by rejection letters and liquor bottles still felt raw. They said it was accidental. I knew it was surrender. But when I opened my eyes again, I was right back here in this cubicle, reading that same cursed email. Only now I had clarity. Now I understood what Emma was playing at. She wasn't here to lead. She was here to crush me, again, in our past relationship. Emma had a method. Raise people up just high enough so their downfall would be devastating. She did it to her college roommate, her ex, even her sister. My growth at TechFlow had triggered that same instinct. But this time, I wouldn't fall for it. The elevator chimed as it opened onto the executive floor, pristine marble, fresh paint, and the lingering scent of overpriced perfume. Jessica, Emma's assistant, glanced up from her desk with visible discomfort. Mr. Martinez, Miss Chen is expecting you. She said to remind you punctuality is very important to her. It was early. Emma's dominance games had already begun. I knocked. Come in, she called, her voice familiar and cold. There she was. Emma, behind a sleek glass desk, her jet-black hair pulled into a severe bun, dressed in a suit worth more than my rent. That same calculated smile was back. Jake, it's so good to see you again. Please, have a seat. The chair was slightly lower than hers, another subtle tactic, one I recognize now. Her entire office was designed for psychological advantage. Diplomas arranged for maximum visibility. Blinds placed so she had the light behind her. Her laptop angled just so I couldn't see the screen. Classic Emma. I have to admit I was surprised to see your name on the list, she said, that syrupy-smooth, tone-masking, razor-sharp intent. When I realized you were here, I thought maybe fate was offering us a second chance. Professionally, of course. Last time, I'd been too wrapped up in our past to see what she was really doing. This wasn't fate. This was precision. She had orchestrated this. I'm grateful for the opportunity, I replied, voice neutral and unreadable. Heard strong things about your leadership. A flicker crossed her expression. That wasn't the reaction she expected. Good. Well, she continued, this department needs results. Everyone has to prove their worth, yourself included. And don't worry, our history won't affect my decisions. That lie sounded just as rehearsed as the first time she used it trite, before she buried me under impossible expectations and sabotaged my every effort. I understand. She studied me, uncertain. The old Jake would have flinched, tried to smooth things over, shown weakness. This version, controlled. .com, dangerous. Excellent. she said briskly. Your first task is the Morrison account. I need a complete overhaul by Friday. Jessica has the files. The Morrison account. It's the same trap she used last time. It's incomplete data, no context, impossible timeline followed by public shaming and probation. But now, I had knowledge. I knew Derek from sales had been quietly working his own pitch. I knew Linda in HR had started keeping records about Emma's leadership. Most importantly, I knew Tyler and it had been building a case about data. Mishandling that was about to explode. As I left the office, I pulled out my phone and sent a message to Sophia Kim in client relations. Coffee later? Got some Morrison ideas you might like? Sophia had also felt Emma's wrath once smart, strategic, and meticulous. She had documents, evidence. This time she'd be my ally, not collateral damage. Revenge isn't about tearing someone down. It's about balance, about justice. Emma thought she'd already won. She doesn't realize the real game has just begun. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed that the Jake Martinez sitting in that cubicle was the same broken man she'd left behind 3 years ago. She had no idea that I'd already lived through her worst, died from it, and come back stronger. As I sat down at my desk and opened the Morrison files, I allowed myself a small smile. Emma Chen thought she was the hunter in this scenario, but she was about to learn that sometimes the prey comes back with teeth. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but this time they sounded like the opening notes of a symphony. My symphony. And Emma was about to discover that the second act of this performance would be very different from the first. Account files spread across my desk like a battlefield map, each document revealing the careful orchestration of my intended downfall. Emma had given me 17 different client profiles, 14 market analysis reports, and 3 contradictory sets of objectives. In my previous life, I'd spent 48 hours straight trying to make sense of this deliberate chaos, only to present a proposal that Emma tore apart in front of the entire executive team. This time, I had different plans. I walked over to Tyler Johnson's old desk in the IT department, where a new hire named Marcus was struggling with what looked like a database integration issue. Perfect timing, need a hand? I asked, already knowing the answer. Marcus looked up gratefully. This whole system is acting weird. Files are disappearing, permissions are getting scrambled. Tyler left some notes, but I can't make heads or tails of his organizational system. Tyler's organizational system. In my previous life, I discovered too late that Tyler had been documenting every irregular data access, every mysterious file deletion, every time someone's work mysteriously vanished from the shared drives. He'd been building a case about systematic sabotage, but he'd been transferred out before he could present his findings. Tyler was pretty thorough, I said, casually flipping through the notebook Marcus had been struggling with. Mind if I take a look? I used to help him with some of the marketing database stuff. 20 minutes later, I had what I needed. Tyler's notes revealed a pattern of late-night access to employee files, strategic deletion of backup copies, and unauthorized modifications to project timelines. The digital fingerprints all pointed to one executive login, accessed from Emma's office IP address. I photographed the relevant pages and returned the notebook to Marcus with a helpful suggestion about the database integration. Then I made my way to Linda Rodriguez's office in HR. Linda was exactly as I remembered, Hersher-pied, radical, and absolutely intolerant of workplace harassment. She looked up from her computer as I knocked on her open door. Jake, right? From marketing. Come in. What can I do for you? I wanted to discuss some concerns about workflow and communication in my new role, I said, settling into the chair. Across from her desk, I'm hoping you might have some guidance on how to handle challenging management situations. Linda's expression shifted slightly. She'd been expecting a typical new employee check-in, not a potential complaint. Kind of challenges are we talking about? I pulled out a printed copy of the Morrison account assignment, laying it carefully on her desk. I received this project yesterday with a Friday deadline. The scope includes 17 different client profiles, but the objectives seem contradictory. I want to make sure I'm not missing something, or if there's a process for clarifying conflicting requirements. Linda studied the document, her frown deepening as she read. This is comprehensive. What kind of strategy deliverable are you expected to produce? Complete overhaul of our Morrison approach, including market positioning, campaign strategy, budget allocation, and implementation timeline for all 17 client segments. In 3 days, Linda's voice carried a note of disbelief. Jake, I need to ask you directly, do you feel this assignment is reasonable given your experience, level, and the time frame? In my previous life, I'd been too proud to admit the assignment was impossible. I'd viewed it as a challenge to prove myself rather than recognizing it as a setup for failure. This time, I met Linda's gaze directly, my professional opinion. This would typically be a 6-week project for a full team. I'm concerned that attempting to complete it solo in 3 days might result in substandard work that could damage our client relationships. Linda made notes in her file. I appreciate your honesty. How has your supervisor responded when you've raised these concerns? I haven't yet. I wanted to understand the normal process first. I don't want to create friction, but I also don't want to set myself up for failure. You're doing exactly the right thing, Linda said. Let me review. This with the Project Standards Committee. In the meantime, I'd recommend documenting all your communications about this assignment. Email confirmations, meeting notes, that sort of thing. Perfect. Linda was already suspicious, and now she'd be watching Emma's management practices closely. I thanked her and headed back to my desk, but made a detour to the break room where I knew I'd find Sophia Kim, grabbing her afternoon coffee. Sophia was stunning in the way that made conversations stop when she entered a room, but more importantly, she was brilliant. She'd been handling client relations for TechFlow for 2 years, and she had an intuitive understanding of account management that Emma both envied and feared. Jake, right? Heard you got promoted? Congratulations. Thanks. Actually, I was hoping to get your perspective on something. I'm working on the Morrison account, and I could use some insight from someone who understands the client relationship dynamics. Sophia's smile faltered slightly. The Morrison account. Emma specifically told me yesterday that she'd be handling all Morrison communications personally. She said marketing would be working independently on strategy development. Interesting. Emma was isolating me from the client contact, ensuring I'd be working with incomplete information. In my previous life, I'd never discovered this crucial detail. That's unusual, I said carefully. Typically marketing and client relations coordinate pretty closely, right? Always, Sophia confirmed, especially on major accounts. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Morrison represents about 15% of our annual revenue. Any strategy changes need to be coordinated with their current satisfaction metrics and relationship dynamics. I pulled out my phone and showed her the project brief Emma had given me. Does this scope align with what you know about Morrison's current needs? Sophia's eyes widened as she read. Jake, this is completely backwards. Morrison specifically requested scaled-down service last quarter because they're consolidating vendors. They're not looking to expand into new market segments. They're trying to streamline their existing operations. The trap was even more elaborate than I'd realized. Emma hadn't just given me an impossible timeline. She'd given me objectives that were diametrically opposed to what the client actually wanted. Any proposal I developed would be not just late, but completely wrong. Would you be willing to share the client brief? I asked, just so I can make sure my strategy aligns with their actual requirements. Sophia hesitated. I'd need to clear it with Emma first. She's been very specific about information flow on this account. Of course. Maybe you could mention to her that I'd requested client context for the strategy development, just to make sure we're all aligned. I could see Sophia processing the political implications. She was smart enough to recognize that Emma was setting me up, but she was also cautious enough not to want to get caught in the middle of whatever game was being played. I'll see what I can do, she said finally. That evening I stayed late in the office, but not to work on the Morrison account. Instead, I used my keycard access to visit the executive floor when I knew Emma would be gone, her assistant. Jessica had mentioned that Emma always left by 6:30 for her yoga class, detail that had seemed irrelevant in my previous life, but was now crucial intelligence. The executive floor was quiet, illuminated only by the emergency lighting and the city glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I made my way to Emma's office, not to break in, but to test something Tyler's notes had suggested: the shared printer. Outside Emma's office was connected to the executive network, which meant it logged all print jobs with timestamps and user credentials. I'd noticed in Tyler's documentation that several of my previous life's lost files had been printed from this location during times when I was supposedly the only one working on them. I sat at the public workstation adjacent to the printer and logged into the print. Queue management system, a skill Tyler had taught me during one of our late-night troubleshooting sessions. The logs told a fascinating story. Over the past month, someone had been printing copies of employee project files, performance reviews, and client communications. The timestamps were always after hours. The user credential was always listed as administrator, and the print jobs were always immediately deleted from the queue. But digital deletion isn't the same as physical destruction, and Tyler had been right about the system keeping backup logs. I had evidence of systematic information theft, and it was all tied to Emma's office location. I photographed the relevant screen captures and logged out carefully, making sure to clear my access history. Then I sent an encrypted email to Tyler's personal account and address I'd memorized from our previous friendship. "Hey Tyler, Jake from TechFlow. I know you transferred out, but I've been looking at some of the database issues you were tracking. Would love to buy you a coffee and get your thoughts on some irregularities I'm seeing. I think you were onto something important." As I rode the elevator down to the parking garage, I reflected on how different this felt from my previous life. Instead of being reactive and defensive, I was building a case methodically. Instead of trying to prove myself to Emma, I was gathering evidence of her misconduct. The security guard at the front desk nodded as I badged out. "Working late again, Mr. Martinez?" "Just getting a head start on the week," I replied. "Know how it is," he chuckled. "I sure do. That new manager on the executive floor has been keeping some long hours, too. Seems like she's really dedicated." "Miss Chen?" "Yeah, she's thorough. Thorough is one word for it. I've had to do 3 wellness checks on her office this month. Motion sensors keep going off after hours, but when I check, nobody's there. Could be a system glitch, but it's got me wondering if someone's been accessing that floor without proper authorization." My pulse quickened. That does sound odd. "Has it looked into it?" "Supposed to, but you know how it is. Low priority unless something goes missing." I made a mental note to follow up on this, with Marcus in it. If Emma was accessing the building after hours without triggering the proper security protocols, it suggested she had administrative access she shouldn't have. As I drove home through the Denver streets, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. In my previous life, I'd been playing Emma's game by her rules. This time, I was playing my own game, and she didn't even know the match had started. Tomorrow, I'd present my Morrison account strategy. It wouldn't be the disaster she was expecting. It would be exactly what Morrison actually needed based on information she'd tried to keep from me. And when she inevitably tried to criticize it, I'd have Sophia's support, Linda's documentation, and Tyler's evidence to back me up. Emma Chen thought she was the predator in this scenario, but she was about to learn that sometimes the prey comes back as an apex predator. Tyler Johnson's response came faster than I expected. His text arrived at 7 in the morning. "Mountain Brew Caf, 8 a.m., order a large Americano, and sit by the window. We need to talk." The coffee shop buzzed with the usual morning crowd of corporate workers grabbing their caffeine fix before. Facing another day in Denver's competitive business landscape, Tyler looked different than I remembered. Leaner, more focused, the kind of sharp alertness that comes from working in cybersecurity rather than corporate IT support. "Jake Martinez," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. I wondered, when you'd figure it out? Figure what out? That Emma Chen has been systematically destroying careers at TechFlow for the past 18 months. You're not her first target, and you won't be her last. Tyler pulled out a tablet and opened what looked like a detailed spreadsheet. "Want to see something interesting?" The document showed a timeline of employee departures from TechFlow, cross-referenced with performance reviews, project assignments, and management changes. The pattern was striking. Every 6 months, Emma would identify a high-performing employee who might pose a threat to her advancement, assign them to increasingly difficult projects, document their inevitable failures until they either quit or were terminated. Marcus Rivera, promoted to senior data analyst, then given the impossible task of integrating 3 incompatible database systems in 2 weeks. Failed, placed on probation, quit within a month. Tyler scrolled down. Sarah Chen, no relation to Emma, promoted to account manager, then assigned to salvage the Henderson account that was already lost due to pricing issues she had no control over. Failed, terminated for inadequate client retention. The list went on. 12 employees in 18 months, all following the same pattern. All victims of Emma's systematic career assassination. How do you know all this? I asked. Because I was supposed to be next, Tyler said grimly. Emma requested my transfer to her department right before I got the offer from TechFlow Solutions. I took the external job instead of waiting to see what she had planned for me. And you've been tracking this from the outside. I've been building a case. Some of these people were my friends, good people who deserved better than having their careers destroyed by someone's power games. Tyler leaned forward, but I needed someone on the inside to help me prove it, someone who understood the pattern and could document it in real time. I thought about the Morrison account files, the impossible deadlines, the strategic withholding of crucial information. She's doing it to me right now. I know, but here's the thing, you're different from the others. You're not just surviving her attacks, you're adapting to them. That tells me you've learned something about her methods. If only he knew how much I'd learned. What do you need from me? Tyler slid a small device across the table. This is a secure recording app. Everything you capture gets uploaded to an encrypted server that Emma can't access or delete. I need you to document every interaction, every impossible assignment, every time she moves the goalposts on you. What about the IT logs you mentioned? The security breaches? That's the beautiful part. Emma doesn't know that when she transferred me out, I left behind some diagnostic software that's been running in the background. It's been tracking unauthorized access, file modifications, and data theft for months. Tyler's smile was cold. She's been digging her own grave and she doesn't even know it. I pocketed the recording device. What's the endgame here? Complete exposure. It's not just Emma, but the entire system that allowed her to operate unchecked. TechFlow's board of directors, the HR department that ignored complaints, the executive, leadership that promoted her despite the pattern of destruction she left behind. The plan was ambitious, but it required patience. I'd need to play the victim convincingly while secretly building an unshakable case. More importantly, I'd need to help Tyler gather evidence about Emma's other victims, the ones who'd been too broken or too scared to speak up. Back at TechFlow, I threw myself into the Morrison account project with renewed purpose. Instead of trying to meet Emma's impossible demands, I focused on creating something genuinely valuable for the client. Using the information Sophia had reluctantly provided, I developed a streamlined strategy that aligned with Morrison's actual needs rather than Emma's fictional objectives. The presentation was scheduled for Friday morning. Emma had arranged for the entire executive team to attend, clearly expecting to use my failure as a public demonstration of her leadership standards. Instead, she was about to get a surprise. Derek Thompson from sales stopped by my desk on Thursday afternoon. Heard you're presenting the Morrison strategy tomorrow. That's a tough account. They've been pretty specific about what they want. Yeah, it's been challenging, I said carefully. Derek had been one of Emma's allies in my previous life, but I was beginning to suspect his loyalty was more pragmatic than personal. You know, I've been working with Morrison for 3 years. If you want to run anything by me beforehand, I'm happy to give you some feedback. The offer surprised me. In my previous life, Derek had been part of the audience that watched Emma tear apart my presentation. Now he was offering to help me succeed. That would be great, actually. I've been wondering if my approach aligns with their procurement patterns. Derek spent an hour reviewing my strategy, offering suggestions that strengthened the proposal significantly. As we worked, I realized that Derek wasn't Emma's ally, was just trying to survive in the same toxic environment that had claimed so many others. This is solid work, he said finally. Really solid. Morrison's going to love the cost-efficiency analysis. Thanks. Appreciate you taking the time. Jake, can I ask you something? How are you finding it, working under Emma's management? The question felt loaded, but Derek's expression seemed genuinely concerned rather than malicious. It's intense. High expectations, tight deadlines, but I'm learning a lot. Derek nodded slowly. If you ever need to talk about anything work-related stress, unrealistic demands, that kind of thing, my door's always open. Sometimes it helps to have someone who understands the pressure. After Derek left, I realized that Emma's reign of terror had created an entire network of potential allies. People who'd watched good colleagues get destroyed, who'd lived in fear of being next, who'd kept their heads down and their mouths shut because they didn't think they had any other choice. That evening, I called Sophia Kim. I wanted to thank you for the Morrison client brief. It made a huge difference in my strategy development. How did your presentation prep go? Better than expected? Actually, I was wondering if you'd be interested in attending the presentation tomorrow. I know Emma mentioned that client relations would be handled separately, but I think you'd find the strategy interesting. There was a pause. Emma specifically told me I wasn't needed for the presentation. Of course, I understand. I just thought, given your expertise with Morrison, you might want to see how the strategy addresses their client satisfaction metrics. Another pause. You know what? I think I will attend as a learning opportunity. Perfect. Sophia's presence would serve multiple purposes. She'd be a witness to Emma's reaction. She'd be able to validate my strategy's alignment with client needs. She'd see firsthand how Emma tried to sabotage work that didn't fit her narrative. I spent Thursday night rehearsing my presentation, but more importantly, I spent time preparing for Emma's inevitable attacks. I anticipated every criticism she might raise, every way she might try to undermine my work, every tactic she might use to make me look incompetent in front of the executive team. In my previous life, I'd been blindsided by her aggression. I was ready for war. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Denver's mountains look close enough to touch. I arrived at the office early, set up my presentation materials, made sure the recording device Tyler had given me was fully charged and ready. Emma arrived precisely at 8, wearing a navy suit that conveyed authority and a smile that conveyed predatory satisfaction. She'd brought her own presentation materials, which meant she'd prepared her own version of the Morrison strategy, probably one that would make mine look amateurish by comparison. Ready for the big day? She asked, her voice dripping with false encouragement. Absolutely. I think you'll be pleased with what I've developed. Her smile faltered almost imperceptibly. She'd been expecting nervousness, maybe even panic. Instead, I was projecting confidence and competence. The conference room filled with familiar faces, the executive team, Derek Thompson, Linda Rodriguez, and, to Emma's obvious surprise, Sophia Kim. Emma's eyes narrowed as she noticed Sophia's presence. But she couldn't object without revealing that she'd deliberately excluded client relations from a client strategy. Presentation. Good morning, everyone, Emma began, taking her position at the head of the table. Today, we're reviewing Jake Martinez's strategy proposal for the Morrison account. This is an important test of our new team structure and our ability to deliver innovative solutions under pressure. The setup was perfect. Emma had positioned my presentation as a test rather than a collaboration, which meant any success would reflect poorly on her leadership style. She'd also emphasized the pressure timeline, which would make her look incompetent if I'd actually succeeded despite her impossible demands. I stood up, activated the recording device in my pocket, and began to present the strategy that would either launch my career or destroy it completely. The difference was that this time, I knew exactly which outcome I was aiming for, and it wasn't the one Emma was expecting. The conference room felt electric as I opened my laptop and connected to the projection system. Emma sat at the far end of the table, her expression carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She was expecting me to fail, spectacularly, and she'd invited an audience to witness my professional destruction. The Morrison account represents a unique opportunity for TechFlow to demonstrate adaptive client management. I began, my voice steady and confident. However, before we discuss expansion strategies, we need to address Morrison's current operational priorities. I clicked to my first slide, which showed Morrison's quarterly satisfaction metrics and cost reduction initiatives. Emma's eyebrows rose slightly. This wasn't the desperate, unfocused presentation she'd anticipated. Based on client communications from the past 6 months, Morrison has been consolidating their vendor relationships to streamline operations and reduce overhead costs. They've specifically requested scaled-down service packages that focus on efficiency rather than expansion. Sophia Kim nodded from her seat, confirming the accuracy of my client's assessment. Derek Thompson was taking notes, and even Linda Rodriguez looked engaged. Emma's face, however, was hardening by the minute. My strategy recommendation focuses on 3 core areas that align with Morrison's stated objectives. Advanced 2. The next slide. First, service consolidation that reduces their vendor management overhead by 30%. Second, automated reporting systems that eliminate redundant meetings and streamline communication. Third, performance metrics that tie our compensation directly to their cost savings. The room was silent, except for the soft scratch of pens on paper as the executives took notes. Now, this was exactly the opposite of what Emma had expected instead of a fumbling, incomplete presentation that she could tear apart. I was delivering a comprehensive strategy that directly addressed the client's actual needs. The projected savings from Morrison would be approximately $200,000 annually. TechFlow would maintain 78% of our current revenue from the account through efficiency gains and performance bonuses. Derek Thompson looked up from his notes. Jake, this is impressive work. How did you identify Morrison's consolidation priorities? I hadn't seen that in any of our recent client communications. Perfect. Derek had just given me the opening eye. Needed. I worked closely with Sophia Kim from Client Relations to understand Morrison's satisfaction metrics and operational feedback. The consolidation priorities came directly from their quarterly review meetings. Emma's face went pale. She'd specifically told Sophia not to share client information with me. But now the entire executive team was learning that effective strategy. Development required exactly the kind of client coordination Emma had tried to prevent. Sophia, Emma said, her voice tight with controlled anger. I thought we discussed maintaining clear departmental boundaries on the Morrison account. Sophia met Emma's gaze calmly. Jake requested client context for strategy development, which seemed like standard protocol. It provided publicly available satisfaction metrics and operational feedback that any account manager would need for effective planning. The subtle emphasis on standard protocol was brilliant. Sophia was making it clear that Emma's attempt to restrict information flow was unusual and counterproductive. The point is, I continued, redirecting attention back to the presentation, this strategy framework can be adapted for our other major accounts. We're not just solving Morrison's immediate needs, we're developing a template for client retention and cost optimization across our entire portfolio. I advanced to my final slide, which showed projected revenue impacts for TechFlow's top 10 accounts. The numbers were compelling. By focusing on client efficiency rather than service expansion, we could increase profit margins while strengthening client relationships. Questions? I asked, closing my laptop and facing the room. Stretched for several seconds before James Morrison, TechFlow's CEO, spoke up. Jake, this is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need to stay competitive. How long would implementation take? Phase 1 could be deployed within 6 weeks. Full implementation across our major accounts would take approximately 4 months, assuming we maintain current staffing levels. Emma finally found her voice. While Jake's presentation is certainly thorough, I have some concerns about the underlying assumptions. Morrison's consolidation initiative might be temporary, and positioning ourselves as a cost-cutting service could limit our growth opportunities. It was a reasonable-sounding objection, but I was ready for it. Nice. That's an excellent point, Emma. However, Morrison's consolidation isn't a temporary cost-cutting measure. It's a fundamental shift in their operational philosophy. Their parent company, Hartwell Industries, implemented the same efficiency standards across all their subsidiaries last year. Morrison is actually behind schedule on meeting their corporate consolidation targets. Emma's expression shifted from confident criticism to visible confusion. She clearly hadn't done her homework on Morrison's corporate structure. Now she was being outmaneuvered by information she should have known. Furthermore, I continued, positioning ourselves as an efficiency partner actually expands our growth opportunities. Instead of competing on service volume, we're competing on client outcomes. That's a much more defensible market position. Derek Thompson leaned forward. Jake, did you coordinate this analysis with our sales projections for Q4? I did. Derek provided some excellent feedback on Morrison's procurement patterns that helped refine the cost savings projections. Another strategic alliance revealed in front of Emma. Not only had I succeeded despite her sabotage, but I'd also built collaborative relationships with other departments. It's exactly the kind of cross-functional teamwork that Emma had been trying to prevent. James Morrison stood up. Jake, I want you to present this to our board of directors next week. Emma, please work with Jake to prepare a broader implementation timeline for our Q4 planning session. Emma's smile looked physically painful, of course. Make sure Jake has all the resources he needs. As the meeting broke up, I noticed Linda Rodriguez lingering near the door. She caught my eye and nodded slightly. She'd witnessed everything, and she understood the implications. Emma waited until the room was almost empty before approaching me. That was quite a performance, Jake. Very comprehensive. Thank you. I'm glad the strategy aligns with Morrison's needs. You should discuss your next assignment. I have some ideas for expanding your responsibilities. The threat was clear, but this time I was ready for it. That sounds great. Should I schedule time with you next week to go over the details? Actually, let's talk now. My office. 5 minutes. As I packed up my presentation materials, Sophia Kim approached me. Jake, that was brilliant work. I've never seen Morrison's operational priorities explained so clearly. Thanks. I couldn't have done it without your client insights. Listen, there's something you should know. Emma called me yesterday and specifically told me not to attend this presentation. She said it would be confusing for Jake to have too many voices in the room. Emma had tried to manipulate the audience as well as the presenter, and now I had another witness to her pattern of control and sabotage. I'm glad you decided to come anyway. So am I, Jake. If you ever need client context for future projects, don't hesitate to reach out. Collaboration makes everyone's work better. As I walked toward Emma's office, activated Tyler's recording device, and mentally prepared for whatever new impossible assignment she was about to give me. But something had fundamentally shifted in the power dynamic between us. Instead of being her victim, I was becoming her problem. Emma's office felt different this time. The psychological intimidation tactics that had worked before the positioning, the power dynamics, the information controls seemed transparent and ineffective. I sat in the same chair that had made me feel small and anxious just a week ago, but now it felt like a strategic observation post. Your presentation was certainly unexpected, Emma began, settling behind her desk. I have to admit, I'm curious about how you managed to develop such detailed client insights with limited access to account information. Standard research and collaboration, I replied. Nothing that wouldn't be available to any strategic planner, working on a major account, of course. Well, given your apparent aptitude for complex analysis, I have a new challenge for you. The Davidson Group has been experiencing some service quality issues, and they're threatening to terminate their contract. I need you to develop a retention strategy that addresses their concerns while maintaining our profit margins. The Davidson Group. In my previous life, this had been the assignment that finally broke me. Davidson was notoriously difficult. Their complaints were contradictory and unreasonable. Their contract was so unfavorable that retaining them would actually cost TechFlow money. Emma had known it was an impossible task, and she'd used my inevitable failure to justify putting me on final probation. But this time, I had advantages she couldn't anticipate. I knew Davidson's real issues weren't about service quality. They were about contract terms negotiated by their previous procurement team. The current management wanted out of the deal but needed TechFlow to terminate the contract so they could avoid penalty clauses. That sounds challenging, I said. What's the timeline? 2 weeks. And Jake? Emma leaned forward with that. A familiar predatory smile. This one really matters. Davidson represents 8% of our annual revenue. If we lose them, it could affect the entire department's performance metrics. The threat was clear. Not only was this assignment designed to be impossible, but Emma was also setting me up to take responsibility for revenue losses that were already inevitable. I understand. I'll need to review their service history and contract terms to develop an effective approach. Naturally, I'll have Jessica send you the files. As I stood to leave, Emma's phone rang. She glanced at the display, and her expression shifted to one of genuine concern. "I need to take this," she said, reaching for the phone. "Close the door behind you." I stepped into the hallway but didn't immediately walk away. Through the closed door, I could hear Emma's voice rising in what sounded like an urgent, agitated conversation. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone suggested crisis management rather than routine business. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Emergency meeting. Mountain Brew in 20 minutes. Big developments." As I rode the elevator down from the executive floor, I realized that the power dynamic between Emma and me had fundamentally shifted. She was no longer setting traps for me. She was walking into mine. The Davidson assignment that was supposed to destroy my career was about to become the foundation for destroying hers. The hunter had become the hunted, and Emma Chen was about to discover that some prey fights back with interest. Tyler's face was grim when I arrived at Mountain Brew Caf. He had his laptop open, and the screen showed what looked like financial records and employment documents. His expression told me everything I needed to know. The investigation had reached its conclusion. "Emma's been embezzling from the Employee Development Fund," he said without preamble. "Small amounts, spread across multiple accounts, disguised as training expenses and conference fees. She's been at it for almost 2 years." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Emma hadn't just been destroying careers for sport, she'd been stealing money while doing it. How much? $87,000 so far? But that's not the worst part. Tyler turned his laptop toward me. "She's been using the stolen funds to pay for a private investigator who's been digging into the personal lives of her targets. Banking records, relationship history, family problems. She's been using people's private information to identify their vulnerabilities." The scope of Emma's operation was staggering. She hadn't just been a toxic manager, she'd been running a sophisticated campaign of psychological warfare funded by corporate theft. "There's more," Tyler continued. "Remember that urgent phone call she took yesterday? That was her private investigator. Apparently, someone's been asking questions about her methods, and he wanted to warn her that her activities might be under scrutiny." Someone's been asking questions? Linda Rodriguez filed a formal complaint with the board of directors yesterday afternoon. Your Morrison presentation was the final piece she needed to document Emma's pattern of sabotage and retaliation. My phone buzzed with an urgent text from Linda. "Emergency meeting with board of directors. Conference room A, 4 p.m. today. Please bring all documentation related to your recent project assignments." The timeline was accelerating faster than I'd expected. Emma's empire was crumbling, but she was desperate and dangerous. Desperate people make unpredictable choices. Arrived at TechFlow to find the office buzzing with unusual energy. Small groups of employees were gathered in hushed conversations, and several people from the executive floor were carrying boxes toward the elevators. Something significant was happening. Sophia Kim intercepted me near the elevator bank. "Jake, thank God you're here. Emma's been calling an emergency meeting with all her direct reports. She claims there's been a security breach and that someone's been spreading false information about her management practices." "Where is she now?" "Conference room B, trying to rally support from the people she hasn't destroyed yet." "But Jake, most of them are asking questions. Derek Thompson has been sharing details about your Morrison presentation, and people are starting to connect the dots about her methods." The elevator opened to reveal Emma herself, flanked by 2 people. "Didn't recognize a man in an expensive suit and a woman carrying a briefcase that screamed corporate attorney?" Emma's face was pale but determined, and when she saw me, her expression hardened into something approaching hatred. "Jake Martinez," she said, her voice carrying across the lobby. "Perfect timing. We need to discuss some serious allegations that have been made against you." The accusation was so unexpected that I almost laughed. Emma was attempting to flip the script, to position herself as the victim of my supposed misconduct. But the timing was all wrong. She was several moves behind in a game she didn't realize she'd already lost. "I'd be happy to discuss any concerns," I replied calmly. "Should we include Linda Rodriguez from HR in that conversation?" Emma's lawyer whispered something in her ear, and her expression shifted slightly. She was beginning to understand that whatever information they'd gathered about me wasn't going to be enough to deflect from her own exposure. "Actually," the man in the expensive suit said, "we're more interested in discussing your recent collaboration with external parties to access confidential company information." They knew about Tyler. Emma had somehow discovered that I'd been working with her former IT colleague, and she was trying to frame our investigation as corporate espionage. It was a clever move, but it was also her final mistake. My conversation with Tyler Johnson about database security vulnerabilities, I pulled out my phone and activated the speaker function. "Tyler, are you available to clarify the nature of our recent discussions?" Tyler's voice came through clearly. "Absolutely, Jake. I'm currently in conference room A with Linda Rodriguez, James Morrison, and the entire board of directors. We're reviewing the comprehensive evidence package I've prepared, documenting systematic embezzlement, privacy violations, and corporate fraud. Emma Chen's private investigator has been very cooperative in explaining how she funded his services." The color drained from Emma's face. Her lawyer grabbed her arm and whispered urgently in her ear. The man in the expensive suit, who I now realized was probably her private investigator, took a step back, as if distancing himself from the conversation. "Emma," I said, my voice carrying the same false sympathy she'd used on me so many times, "it sounds like there's been a misunderstanding." "About who's under investigation here?" Security guards emerged from the stairwell, moving with the purposeful stride of people following specific instructions. Emma looked around the lobby as if seeing it for the first time, finally understanding that she was trapped in a building where everyone now knew exactly what she'd been doing. "Miss Chen," one of the guards said politely, "the board of directors would like to speak with you in conference room A. They've asked us to escort you." Emma's composure finally cracked. She looked at me with pure venom, all pretense of professionalism. "Abandoned? You think you've won something here? You think destroying my career makes you a better person?" "I think holding you accountable for destroying other people's careers makes the workplace better for everyone," I replied. 12 employees, Emma. 12 people whose lives you've damaged for your own advancement." The security guards waited patiently as Emma was led toward the elevator. Her lawyer and the private investigator hurried after them, but their body language suggested they were more interested in damage control than support. As the elevator doors closed, Sophia Kim appeared. At my side. "Jake, that was incredible. How did you know they'd try to frame you?" "Because desperate people always try to drag others down with them. Emma's been using that strategy her entire career." 3 hours later, Linda Rodriguez found me at my desk. "Emma Chen has been terminated effective immediately. Is referring her case to law enforcement for prosecution. Her private investigator is cooperating fully in exchange for immunity." "What about the other victims? 12 employees she destroyed?" "James Morrison has authorized a comprehensive review of all personnel decisions made during Emma's tenure. Anyone who was unfairly terminated or forced to resign will be offered restitution and the opportunity to return to TechFlow." The news was satisfying, but what came next was even better. "Jake, the board would like to offer you Emma's position as regional manager. They were impressed by your Morrison presentation and your handling of this entire situation." I considered the offer carefully. 6 months ago, the idea of becoming regional manager would have seemed like an impossible dream. Now it felt like justice served with a side of poetic irony. "Except," I said, "but I have some conditions about how the department will be restructured." 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where Emma had tried to destroy my career, presenting TechFlow's quarterly results to a room full of impressed executives. The Morrison account strategy had been so successful that 3 major competitors had tried to hire me away. Derek Thompson had been promoted to senior sales director. Sophia Kim was now head of client relations. Tyler Johnson had returned to TechFlow as Chief Information Security Officer. Most importantly, the culture of fear and manipulation that Emma had created was gone. Employees collaborated openly, shared information freely, and supported each other's success instead of competing destructively. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your promotion. You always were smarter than I gave you credit for." I deleted the message without responding. Emma Chen was part of my past now, a lesson learned and a challenge overcome. The future belonged to people who built others up instead of tearing them down. From my new office window, I could see the Denver mountains in the distance, snow-capped and eternal. Some peaks looked insurmountable until you started climbing them. Then you discovered that with the right strategy, the right allies, and the patience to play the long game, even the highest summit was within reach. The hunter had become the hunted, the prey had become the predator, and justice had been served. With interest, up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Let's click and check them out.